Hi, friends. For a while I've been reflecting on what sociologists sometimes call the disenchanted nature of our time, meaning that alongside all of the amazing and often life-giving scientific and technological advancements of this age, we've also become a people who are often deprived of any sense of mystery or the miraculous or any sense of the active Spirit of God interacting with us through daily life. And this disenchantment, it extends into many areas, including dimensions of church life, unfortunately, because oftentimes church just becomes another place to rehearse old answers, rather than a supportive community where you can actively engage the Spirit that is on the move and that's inviting us to join in God's work in the world and to see new things as we go. And don't get me wrong, old traditions and old foundations, they're very important. They play a very important role in a healthy spiritual life, and I'm all about that. But the biblical story is often one of God's Spirit actively leading people into new discoveries that are critical for their time. As the theologian William Willimon says, faith, when it comes down to it, is often our breathless attempt to keep up with the redemptive activity of God, to keep asking ourselves, what is God doing? Where on earth is God going now? And there's a powerful story in Acts chapter 10 where the Apostle Peter finds himself in just such a situation, in just such a moment. He's on a rooftop and he's in prayer, and then unexpectedly falls into a deep trance. And in that trance, he encounters a bizarre vision where the Spirit of God shows him all kinds of unclean animals. These are animals he's not allowed to eat under his religious law. And in that moment, the Spirit tells him to kill and eat those very animals. The voice literally tells him to break his religious law, to violate his scriptures. And this happens 3 times. 3 times it happens. And each time, Peter forcefully rejects the notion that he could do this. He says, I would never eat what is unclean. But the voice, which is the voice of the Spirit in this setting, the voice says back to him 3 times, what God has made clean, you must not call profane. What God has made clean, you must not call profane. And then the vision just ends without explanation. It just ends, just like that. So Peter wakes up and he's in a state of intense disorientation. And of course he would be. But right then, right in that moment of confusion, 3 men, 3 Romans, show up at his doorstep. One of which was a soldier. Now, these are people Peter would ordinarily avoid. In fact, the same religious law would tell him to not associate with such Gentiles as being unclean. But he had just had that crazy vision, and so he senses the Spirit telling him, maybe it's okay. Maybe you can trust these men. Maybe just listen to what they have to say. What God has made clean, you must not call profane. So Peter, he leans in a bit. He leans in faith. He listens to their story, and it turns out that there's a Roman Centurion, a good and devout military leader down the road about 2 days' journey named Cornelius. And this man claims to have been visited by an angel who told him to search for Peter, to go find Peter. Now, this is uncharted territory for Peter. But interestingly, he stays open. He stays open to what's unfolding before him, and he goes with these men on the 2-day journey to find Cornelius. And this whole thing is loaded with risk because, again, Jews were religiously prohibited from associating with Gentiles, and these just weren't like ordinary Gentiles. They were Roman soldiers. They were the oppressors. But Peter is moving forward in faith, in curiosity, and with also some caution. He doesn't know how this is going to turn out. And in fact, when he arrives Cornelius' house and finds a large group already assembled waiting for him, one of the first things he does is to announce that he's not supposed to be there. And everybody knows it. He's not supposed to be there. But he also says that God has shown him enough to know that he needs to hear Cornelius' story. He needs to listen. And so he does. He listens to the story of Cornelius' search for God and Cornelius' devotion to God, of his generosity to the local community, and especially of the visit by this angel who told him God had seen Cornelius and all these things and to go find Peter. And as Peter's listening, he's remembering that vision he had on the rooftop, and the uncanny timing of the men showing up at his doorstep right at the moment of the vision ending. And Peter declares, now I truly understand that God shows no partiality. Now I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. Peter goes on to share the story of Jesus, and while he's doing that, the Spirit of God moves among all the people gathered in that house in miraculous ways. And as Peter sees that happen, he's convinced that God is now breaking down all the structures of division that had carefully been constructed over hundreds of years. And he baptizes everybody. He baptizes the entire household into the family of Jesus. But all of this entire amazing story, all of it would have been unfathomable to Peter even just a few days earlier. And what I love about this story and so many others in the book of Acts, is that Peter is having to discern what to do in real time. He's having to discern what to do step by step in real time and without any roadmap to follow. There's no game plan in advance. He's figuring it out as he goes, which is the way our lives feel when we are led into something new or something challenging. And on the one hand, all Peter initially had to go on was a really weird vision that made no sense on his face. I mean, God was telling him to eat unclean food and to break his religious law. But then there's the synchronicity, or you might even say the serendipity, of the three messengers showing up at just the moment that he emerges from the vision. And then he listens to his own eternal, internal promptings of the Spirit, and he listens to the stories that these messengers have brought with them, and eventually Cornelius' own story. And he sees the Spirit move powerfully among all of their lives, and as he adds up this entire sequence of events, he gains the confidence to declare that God was doing something truly new, and that all the old laws of exclusion and division had to go. But it took, this is the key, it's important, it took the expansion of his spiritual imagination to even allow Peter to respond to the signs in this way. I mean, this is an expansion of imagination that probably began years ago, spending so much time with Jesus, the Jesus who would often push the boundaries of the religious law to minister to those who needed him. Walter Brueggemann says, obedience follows imagination. Obedience follows imagination. Our obedience, or you could just say our path in life, will not venture far beyond or run risks beyond our imagined world. If we wish to have a transformed obedience or transformed life, then we must be summoned to an alternative imagination. Now, I do believe God is always on the move in and around our lives, but we will only be able to see it. And we will only be able to respond to the extent our spiritual imaginations are being opened and expanded, and also, in a sense, re-enchanted. My prayer, then, for us this week is that our minds and our hearts would be opened to see and to respond to the Spirit's work around us. And for you in particular, I pray that you this week, you be open and catch the glimmers of the Spirit's working around you. May you notice the synchronicities between your prayers and the internal promptings and longings of your heart, what the Spirit might be saying to you internally. The synchronicity between those things and the circumstances and the people around you. And like Peter, may you be willing to follow those threads, and maybe be surprised where the Spirit takes you over and over again, even this week. Amen.